Hello, Claudia. How have you been? Well, what can I say? I'm a little worried, whispered a tired voice on the phone. I can tell. Is something wrong? How can I help you? I inquired. Last month, my babysitter mentioned seeing something in my son's playroom. She told me that she saw something in the reflection of the mirror. I dismissed it thinking it was her imagination, but that was just the beginning. Strange things started to take place at home. The garden flowers withered away, and our otherwise amiable dog, Teddy, started to act very weird. He was rushing into different parts of the house, barking and growling relentlessly. Teddy used to wake me up every morning, but on that particular day, he didn't. I hurriedly took him to the hospital. The veterinarian told me that unfortunately he had passed away, and they are sorry. I cannot believe it. He was only 12 years old and in good health. But the worst was yet to come. A terrible stench filled the house, like decaying flesh. I called pest control, thinking that a mouse had died under the floorboards, but they couldn't find anything. And then there was my son. He started waking up and crying in the middle of the night. One morning I found bruises on his hand and discovered that he had wet his bed. I knew that something was terrifying him, but I had no idea what to do. As the days went by, the atmosphere in the house grew more and more oppressive. Strange noises echoed through the halls, and shadows seemed to move on their own. I felt like something was watching me, even when I was alone. One night, I woke up because it was extremely cold. I went to the kitchen to switch on the heating, but popped into Jesse's room on the way to check up on him. Something I saw still haunts me. The room was a complete disaster zone, as if a malevolent force had torn through it, wreaking havoc on everything in its path. The wardrobes were left open, clothes were strewn about haphazardly, as if someone had ripped them from their hangers and tossed them aside. His toys were everywhere like they had been hurled by some unseen force. I tried to calm down the grief-stricken mother by saying that there must be some logical explanation for everything. Yet she continued. This afternoon, a teacher from school called and told me that Jessie has been extremely rude and started a fight with another kid from school. My sweet boy would never hurt a fly, Claudia uttered through the tears. Sorry, it's just that I haven't been sleeping well. It feels like I can't wake up from this nightmare. I hear you, Claudia. Don't worry. I know someone who might help. Hope it's nothing bad. It could be that Jessie is just throwing tantrums. A couple of days passed and I received a call around 11 p.m. It was Claudia. She sounded very agitated. Her voice broke with every word. She could barely speak. The only thing I understood was, "Do you hear that?" I couldn't hear anything until she fell completely silent. Then I heard some noises, like an animal in heat, accompanied by murmurs of a boy or a girl. I don't know. It was a bit strange. Then I told her, "Start praying." And when she began, I heard a loud bang in the room. "What was that?" I asked. "The door just slammed," uttered Claudia. "Okay, don't worry. It seems that whatever was there has already left. I've talked to these people about your situation, and they will pay you a visit on Saturday. I will give them your address, and they'll visit you. Go and have some rest. You need to gather your strength." I didn't want to scare her, so I didn't mention that while she was praying, I heard somewhat macabre and mocking laughter on the phone. That was the moment I realized something was wrong. On Saturday, I called her to ask what had happened. Her reaction on the phone was very desperate because they didn't give her much information, which was what I expected. But everything was for a good reason. They didn't want to alarm her more than she already was. "Tomorrow at noon, they want to visit my house again," said Claudia. "But I'm very afraid." "What is going on?" "I already told you not to worry. They will help. They know what they are doing." "Did they tell you something they didn't want to tell me?" Claudia asked with suspicion in her voice. "No. They told me that they would need to come around and do a further investigation before making any assumptions. Upon calling the investigators and asking about the cause of these disturbances, they only told me it was a delicate matter, and that Claudia's child established a connection with some force from another dimension. Something powerful and malignant. They are not sure yet what it is, but its presence is very evident." That same night I lay down and felt very tired. I didn't talk to Claudia, not because I didn't want to, but because I felt something heavy on me. However, late at night I received a call from her, but this time she sounded more agitated. I heard desperate screaming from the phone, and I barely could recognize Claudia. "What's wrong? Calm down." As I listened to Claudia's panicked voice over the phone, a chill ran down my spine. The static on the line made it hard to hear her. but it sounded like something was trying to interfere with our conversation. Then suddenly, the line went dead. Before I could even process what had just happened, my phone rang again. This time, it was an acquaintance of mine, their voice trembling with fear. "You need to come to Claudia's house right now!" I rushed to Claudia's house as fast as I could. When she opened the door, I could see the terror in her eyes. She was shaking uncontrollably, her eyes red and puffy from hours of crying. As I entered the house, I was greeted by two priests. Their faces were ashen, and they were clutching crucifixes tightly in their hands. I felt a knot form in my stomach as I realized that this was far worse than I could have imagined. We followed Claudia to her child's room, and what we saw there will haunt me for the rest of my life. Jessie was lying on his bed, his tiny body writhing in agony. His eyes were rolled back in his head, and his joints were dislocated. It was like he was possessed by something beyond our understanding. The priests began to chant in Latin, their voices low and ominous. Claudia was screaming, tears streaming down her face as she begged for her child to be saved. Jessie was unconscious. He looked like a piece of cloth. The priests asked Claudia to hold him in her arms and hold him tight. Claudia watched in horror as the priests began to perform the exorcism ritual. They chanted in Latin, and the room filled with an eerie silence. Suddenly, one of the priests began to cough up blood, and Claudia recoiled in fear. But the priest stood firm, determined to finish the ritual. As he continued to chant, he was suddenly thrown against the wall with such force that his forehead split open. Despite his injuries, the priest stood up and commanded the others to keep praying. Claudia could feel the presence of a malevolent force in the room, and the air grew colder with each passing moment. While the chanting persisted, the force grew more potent by the second. Claudia sensed its magnetic pull, urging her towards an abyss. However, she clung tightly onto Jessie, resolute in not letting go. Suddenly, one of the priests placed a massive mirror in front of Jessie's bed. The mirror then reflected an entity from another realm, a skinny, deformed figure. Its skin appeared burnt, stretched tightly over its skeletal structure, with sickly black tones. Its eyes emitted an infernal glow, and its mouth brimmed with razor-sharp teeth. Sharply wound wires held its decaying flesh together, as slime oozed from the sores on its body. Moreover, it held a little boy firmly in its hands. As the demon continued to put up a fight, the air became thick with the odor of burning flesh. In response, the priests hurled oils mixed with holy water onto the mirror, causing the room to tremble as though an earthquake had struck. The mirror suddenly shattered, and the entity vanished from the reflection. At that very moment, the little boy opened his eyes, and his mother burst into tears of relief. "It was only a nightmare," she whispered to Jessie, while still sobbing. "It has been a few weeks, and it appears that the demon has not returned to the house. Furthermore, the house was blessed by a priest, and since then, everything seems to be in perfect order."